In this section, we are going to see Hadoop architecture. Now, why we are going to learn Hadoop architecture? Because most of the time, as discussed in the last video, we will be using Hadoop for storing our cold data, which is not very frequently used in our businesses. And using systems which are expensive might not be a good idea to go about it and solving the problem of big data and storage. Now let's see the Hadoop cluster, which stores a large amount of data within it. The architecture makes it also possible for high availability and able to scale up the entire data system which stores your cold data storage. And also this architecture itself will make the use of inexpensive hardware come into the picture, which makes the storage entire cost, which is the total cost of ownership of storage, retrieval and doing operation, to a very low level. It will bring down the total cost of ownership. So let's look into the architecture. In this architecture, I'm showing you one Hadoop cluster. Similar to this, we can have multiple Hadoop cluster arranged in this fashion. For example, your client will be accessing this switch. This is the switch. Now this switch in turn will redirect our client calls to the system which stores the data. Now, when we talk about all the systems which are connected to the switch, there are two types of distinct systems. The first type of system is called the name node, and the other systems are called the data nodes or the worker nodes. So why they are called name nodes and worker nodes? Basically, when we need to access any one of the system, for example, if this is system number 1, this is system number 2, this is system number 3, and the client data is stored in the system number 3. Now we need to also understand what data is stored in this system so we can basically fulfill the client requirement when the corresponding call is made. So one node dedicatedly in this branch is responsible for just understanding and storing what data is placed where, and that node is called the name node. This architecture is commonly referred as your master and slave architecture. The master node and name node decides and keep count of where the data has been stored or in which node you need to push your task or processing. So your Hadoop system will be first utilized for storage, and it also will be utilized for computation on that storage. So your worker node will be doing that computation. They will be running heavy program on the data which they have, and it's the work of the master node to divide the computation among the worker nodes. Now, in this scenario, we are typically talking about storage. So storage is one of the key factor why which we are going to use Hadoop system in our ERP if we are using SAP HANA. So we are going to focus on that aspect. If you are going to go into computation side and doing heavy processing, there will be little difference in the architecture. Our main focus when we are working with ERP companies is to store data and able to retrieve it when we require. Processing and heavy computation will be mostly run with our Spark system and also with SAP HANA system. Now we are using Hadoop specifically for cold storage of large amount of data. And in the scenario, we have one name node and all the other slave nodes or the data nodes are storing data. The name node is keeping track of where those data points have been stored. And switches allow us to redirect the traffic which is incoming and outgoing. In the next section, we will see an example when our client is trying to push a data and how the data will be actually going into buffer and get stored, how the name node will be updated and how the data node will be updated. Keeping in mind that this is an entire Hadoop cluster, we might be using a cloud which internally takes care of that. And that is the case most of the company are running nowadays. They don't go for managing individual infrastructure independently. For example, if I'm trying to create a Hadoop cluster to store my historical data of ERP, which are not used on day-to-day activity, then I will be putting this data out of my ERP system to this Hadoop cluster, and some of the service provider like Google, AWS will give me out-of-the-box capability and create the Hadoop cluster internally. So I don't have to also create the infrastructure individually, and those models are commonly referred as infrastructure as a service. And this type of model is what we are going to learn also and implement in the project core, because we are not going to spin up individual hardware. That is not the way enterprise nowadays. We are running on cloud, and we should be also aware how that is done. So let's go ahead in the next section and understand how those operation of write and read happens within these Hadoop clusters of data storage.